Maybe you could sing a song for a second, Brian, and I'll say hello in the chat.
I don't think anybody wants that.
You could explain what squid is.
I still don't know. We just talked about it.
You just told me what it was.
No, you brought up Ask Jeeves, and I said, Cody, that is 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And then you said, you're the one with all the gray hair. And then it just went sideways from there.
Right. Downhill. Hey, Sarah. Thanks for being on here. All right, guys. So while people are hopping in, we've got a little over 500 who are registered, which is awesome. Anybody who couldn't make it today, we're going to send you the recording. So that's why we're recording it. I mean, there's nothing hidden here. We don't care what you do with it. You can show to your team. You can, whatever you want to do with it, it's yours. Like, we're fine. Brian and I are going to just host a mastermind around the 13-point business plan that we teach in ESO. The challenge in ESO is that, especially when you try to do it in one day, plus the one that we did, which is probably how you got here, we had like 9 guests, which is awesome, but it chews through time. And so we couldn't we couldn't scuba dive on those 13 points. We had to almost like jet ski through it. And so our goal is just to go back and forth. I'm going to share some of the things I've done. Brian's going to share what he's done. We're going to talk about some of the things that both of us know that others have done in the 13-point plan. I think that we do a disservice when we only talk about our own unique perspective. It's like, wait, I know so-and-so did this and it rocked, or so-and-so did this and they said they'd never do it again, and here's why. But we really want it to be very open. Like, if it were a class, we would have called it a class. We really want it to be a mastermind. So with that said, in the chat, anything specific when we go, we're just going to go point by point by point, and we'll kind of clear it and go, are we ready for the next point? Put it in the chat. If it's general enough, we'll just handle it right here. If it's super, super specific, I might toss you an email address or give you Brian's cell phone number, and then like we can deal with that like one-to-one if it's a really specific one that 400 other people don't care about. Will the recording be available to everybody? Yes. So we'll send it out to everybody who was registered. And I mean, in fact, Lacey, we can just send it to everybody regardless, right? Yeah, I don't know why I'm asking. We're going to send it to everybody who was registered, which includes people that are on here. So if that was your question, yes. All right. So with that amazing introduction, Brian, for anybody who's been living under a rock, will you tell us who you are and where you're from?
Yeah, Cody, living under a rock. I guess what that really means is you've been around for a little while, Brian. So you'd like to think you've met a few people at KW. Yes, Brian Gubernick. I'm out of Scottsdale, Arizona. Though today, if you could tell by the brick here in the background, I'm at HQ. I'm in Austin today. Flew in to host this with you, Cody, only to get here to Keller Williams International and see you're not here. You're actually in Portland.
Right, but I have brick here too, so we're gold.
Yeah. It's kind of like, well, I won't go down that path. I was going to mention, I don't know if you caught, Biden has his whole White House setup, but not at the White House. Did you see that?
Moving right along.
You've got the KWRI.
No rabbit trails.
But you're in Portland. I'm out of Scottsdale, Arizona. I've been with Keller Williams since February of 2007. That's when I started selling. So almost 15 years now. And I have worn, like you, Cody, worn virtually every hat within the company, from agent to ALC member to OP and beyond. Bottom line, I'm deeply engaged with Keller Williams and will forever be. This is my home. This is the company that is responsible for and has allowed me to grow the business that I've had an opportunity to grow. One thing you'll hear me emphasize today, and Cody, I think you feel very strongly about this as well. I am very clear on the fact that my success as a real estate agent and as a real estate team owner, winning in that game, is what has allowed for all of the other things I've had an opportunity to dive into. And I emphasize that point early, and I do it often because I think it's easy for us, Cody, to go off in a variety of different directions or want to follow the next new hot thing. But when you look and you study those that come before you, when I studied those that came before me, as well as my peers that have far surpassed me, I think it's really important to recognize it all stems from building a really sound foundation And that foundation is that real estate team, that jump off point, which is why I'm so passionate about, or one of the reasons I'm passionate about, this conversation today. This conversation is really about how to take this real estate team as we traditionally know it as, and turn it into a business, a bigger business. When I got into the expansion game, which was about a decade ago, I realized that's when my real estate team became a business. That's when my systems mattered, when distance started playing a role. All of these things, the snapshot, actually honoring it, the 13-point, honoring it, performing, reviewing it, all of that stuff, that's when my business really became a business. And I can't wait to talk around that stuff today. So kind of long-winded, but I'm really excited to be here, man. I'm really excited to hang out. And
no, that's the
best thing I could do is share all the areas I've screwed up in and maybe a few areas that I had success in, and hope others learn from that.
Right. I mean, I feel like that's the benefit of doing a mastermind, is where we can just talk or have a conversation and include people, rather than having, well, I've got 88 pages of material and I've got 62 slides that go with it and 200 bullet points. And like, this is where we get to drive off road a little. When you were starting in 07, 08, 09, of course, you got really big on the short sale side. Yeah. And not that I want to talk about short sales. And somebody during ESO 2 weeks ago said, hey, Brian, do you think they're coming back? What's going to happen there? I'm not too interested in that. But what I am interested in, and I don't know that I've ever asked you, what things translated from running a successful short sale business to the other businesses that you do? Because the other businesses you're in today have nothing to do with negotiating with banks or going up the line at banks or standing outside of a bank with a sign or any of those things. But I'm curious, did anything translate over? Like, what business principles, if anything?
Yeah. I mean, not that anybody wants me to spend all day on that type of topic, but that's one we could discuss for a while. The reality is that short sale business, and a lot of you guys watching today, participating today, may not even know what a short sale is, and I hope you never have to learn. But when I got into real estate, my first 5 years of real estate sales, I was all in distressed property because that's where the market was at. It's all short sale and foreclosure.
And super big in Phoenix.
It was, Phoenix was the hotbed of all of them.
Like if you'd have been in Ohio, maybe not the same, or
it would have been different. And when I think around, it's funny. It sounds cliche, but it was absolutely my world. My entire business was constructed around a massive failure. Like I got into, and I mean, many have heard this story. I won't bore you with it, but my first 7 or 8 short sales that I ever did in my career, they were all my own. Right. So I fell into that business because my real estate portfolio had collapsed along with Phoenix's real estate market. And I didn't really know what else to do. I started working on these short sales for myself and soon realized maybe there's a business opportunity here. So in answer to your question, the first thing, and again, I really live this. I know many tell stories like this. This is the story of my entire career. It's kind of the crux of what started everything was I failed, and my business or what I had collapsed, and I had my back against the wall and I had to figure it out. And this is where it went. So in a sick and twisted way, I've oftentimes asked myself, well, when's the next really big failure coming? Because this first one that I just described, this first major one, it created millions upon millions of dollars of commission income over the years. And then all of the other things that came from it. So What was the difference between me and everybody else, or many others, I should say? At the time, I was 27 years old and I was naive and I was broke and I had no responsibilities and I didn't know any better but to get up the next morning and go figure it out.
I didn't know that part of the story. Did you buy those homes before you were an agent? Were you an investor in real estate?
Yeah, I got my real estate license in 06 just to save on commissions. In Phoenix, remember, when you don't know what you want to do with your life, you get a real estate license. That's what we do in Phoenix. Right. For anybody joining us today, most people don't go to college or, graduate high school and they say, you know what I want to do? I want to be a realtor. Now, I don't mean to offend anybody that didn't.
I like people. Yeah, I'll go do that.
Our buddy, Jason Abrams, he went from high school. I think he graduated high school, maybe, but he went from high school and went right into real estate after like a year, or after like a semester. But most it's like your second or third career. And that was my path. I got into real estate investment and the market was doing this. So it was hard not to have success until one day, which is never one day. But in my mind, one day the market just collapsed. I just wasn't smart enough or savvy enough to understand all of the metrics that lead to that. But yeah, my hand was forced. And so I went, and I'm like, what am I going to do? Well, there was a bunch of signs around town, these red signs with this real estate team name on it. The name on it was Zalesnik.
Yeah.
Most probably don't remember Zalesnik, Ryan and Don Zalesnik. Ryan Zalesnik happened to go to high school with me. We didn't know each other. I knew his name. And at the time, I had a friend, and she was dating Ryan. And I said, hey, I don't know what to do. Ryan seems to be pretty successful. Will you team me up? Will you set me up a meeting? And I went into the Zalesnik group and I said, hey, I have this idea, like I'm doing these short sales. There might be something here. And he goes, yeah, why don't you go build that under my team? And I'm like, cool, what's it pay? And he's like, dude, you're a real estate agent now. We're paid on commission. I didn't even know that. Like, I mean, I knew realtors were paid on commission, but I was like, I thought it was a job opportunity. And so I started building out this short sale division. And eventually I had to roll that out because of a lot of things going on. And Ryan, I mean, there's always like a relationship or two that gets you to where Ryan's my relationship early on. He's at the end of the ESO class, we always have those, or a lot of our classes, we talk about Oprah and her connection, or Walt and his brother Roy, and the Beatles with George Martin, right? Well, Ryan was my conduit. He was my guy. Anyhow, though, that all stemmed from this massive failure. And so I look back, I seriously, I'm like, man, the last big crash in my world actually worked out all right. And don't get me wrong, today, few more responsibilities, right, Cody? Like between the kids, my wife, and all the other things going on, there's more to it than just me, a condo, and a Labrador. But I do look at that. So that was definitely something I learned early on. The other thing I learned early on, and expansion really forced my hand on this. I had, if I could draw it right now, I had the business model at that time that many of us have, which is you in the middle and everybody around you. Like that was the org chart. Like me as the nucleus, and then all of these people around me. I would present it as this organized structure, org chart. But the truth of the matter is, it was me, and everybody was like, and I was like controlling chaos. I heard Gary Vaynerchuk say it the other day. He said his job, he's a professional firefighter. That's kind of, because that's kind of what I was doing. I was in the middle, and I'm putting out fires. Expansion, and a lot of the conversation we have today, it forced my hand to create, to organize, to define structure, roles, systems. Now, mind you, I thought I had that, but when you start increasing distance, when you start creating more exposure, more risk, when you have less time, my hand was forced to create these things. And I would say that's the other thing. I'm a huge fan, and we had him in one of our masterminds. E-Myth Revisited.
Yes.
E-Myth, like that book became, in addition to MREA, that became kind of my playbook for.
I want to stop and ask you, because you said it, like systems and models, and I was thinking and didn't say it, but I feel like a lot of us give it lip service and we just say the words. We don't know what they really mean. But then another thought popped into my mind, and you were probably sitting in the mastermind with Gary one day when he said, be careful that you don't become so systematized that you end up having to create systems to follow up on and check in on your systems. And it was like, it's just one of those weird, you're like, oh my God, that makes all the sense in the world. And you're writing it down. You're like, but wait, like, where do I use that? Like where does that play in my company or my business? And so like one of the superpowers that you have is that you're amazing with people, and you're great at reacting, and you're great at planning, and you're great at putting out fires, like all those things. And so like, I hear this like it's only a bad thing, but it's not. Like, it's also part of what makes you amazing. So I'd love to have you speak to the comment of be careful not to become so systematized, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, I have two real thoughts on that. The first thought is that while you said it was a superpower to connect and do all of these things, I'll also be on it. Like, a superpower of mine was that I wasn't a great sales agent either. I'm not saying that for effect. I'm not trying to be funny. I was never a great sales agent. I was good. And I loved to go and hunt like you, Cody. I wanted to go hunt and take a deal. The second I took a deal, it was like, man, I don't know if this is for me. So I naturally, I recognized that I wasn't fantastic in that area. And so for me to pull myself out and focus on building the business was a natural kind of organic thing for me to do. Now, that being said, if you are a fantastic agent, you should embrace that. And then it begs the question, okay, who are you going to bring behind you that is more operationally based? Like in my world, and you know this, Cody, like because of my, just being a good agent, not a great one, I had to bring a great agent into my world, which is why many probably don't know this because they haven't been with KW as long as maybe I have, or you have, or Jason Abrams. But Jason was my partner in expansion for 8 or 9 years.
Long time.
And the reason that partnership came to be was because I was fairly strong systems and operations wise, and he was 10 times the real estate sales agent.
Right.
And so we had that yin and yang. So I think about the superpower being like, it wasn't so like, yes, I like people and systems and all of that, but it also helped that I wasn't great as an agent. The other thing I think about though, Cody, and
hang on, I'm going to stop you again.
Go ahead.
If you wheeled back, so most people watching today would probably know who Jason Abrams is today. And Jason's in like a big deal in our industry. Could your business, if you went back to when you were expanding, could your business afford to hire Jason today?
Oh, today? No, I couldn't get Jay. No, especially not then. No.
Right. So I need everybody to hear that. Like this is a really important thing to what Brian's talking about that has to do with this 13-point business plan. You hire people, no matter what you do, like think about it like a sports team. You have a salary cap. Now in the athletic world, the salary cap might be set by the commissioner or the league. Your and my salary cap is set by our budget. Like how much money do we have? At the time, Brian was able to go hire someone like Jason who whatever it is that you paid him or whatever it is that you guys split wouldn't be enough today, but it was then.
Yeah.
And I want you to really see that. Like if you're out there hunting for your partner today, whether it's a partner or just loosely the term partner and they're really just an employee or whatever, totally fine. I'm good with all of it. I want you to think, who can I afford? Like, because Brian probably couldn't go and hire Jason today. Like, it's too much money. It wouldn't make any sense. And he would probably demand more money than the role is worth, which I think is another really big point that we find when people are building out their expansion businesses. They find a talent and they go, the talent is worth, I'll pluck a number out of the sky, 200 grand. And we're like, cool, sounds amazing, but the job is worth 80. Well, yeah, but no, she's awesome. She's worth 200. I know she's awesome. I know she's worth 200. Your business might not have a role that needs somebody worth 200, which means you got to look down and go, look, the job's worth 80. No matter how good the person is, I can't pay more than 80. Maybe you could do 90. I could probably justify even 95 or 100, but I can't take an $80,000 role and put a $200,000 person into it. It's corrupt to the business.
I love that. And just to piggyback on it, I mean, and just maybe a different angle, same concept. And you've heard it before, Cody, we've talked about it. There was a point in Cody's career. I could have picked Cody up for $35,000, for $40,000, for all of us, for everybody in attendance today.
Right, 100%.
There's a point in every one of our, like, I'll tell you for me, at 25, 26 years old, 25 years old, I was working for Deloitte. It used to be Deloitte & Touche. I was an accountant for Deloitte. I was getting paid $42,000 a year, and I was making more money than all my friends at $42,000 a year. I could still be at Deloitte today if the opportunity.
When you were 25, that was like 50 years ago. Okay. And so with inflation and the value of money in the 50s compared to 2020, like right. That was a lot of money in 1965.
Is equal to 342 today. I get it. But hypothetically, that wasn't the case. The point, though, is if there was still, like, if Deloitte had aligned with what I wanted to do and the opportunity was great, they could have picked me up at 40 grand and I could still be there. Or they did pick me up at 40 grand. I could still be there. There's a point in everybody, from you and me to Gary Keller at one time. I mean, remember when Gary tells his story, it typically starts with, I was managing somebody else's real estate business. And I would contend that if that opportunity was bigger and maybe had gone a slightly different direction and the relationships had morphed a little differently than they did, there may not be a Keller Williams. There may be another really, 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 really big company that Gary's responsible for the growth of. We all had that window of time. What happened though? What happened was the opportunity ceased to exist from our perspective, right? Like we all were doing something. Most of us were doing something before real estate. The only reason we're no longer doing that thing is because we perceive the opportunity to no longer be as great or to no longer exist. So we moved on. So people leave your world when opportunity ceases to exist. That's their perception. So anyhow, I mean, same thing you just said, you're right. Everyone can be gotten at some point. 10 years ago, Jason was a much different number for me in our relationship than he obviously is today. But going back to, I want to make a point. The other, you had talked about like, how you talked about somewhat disengaging from the business. I'm a firm believer, and I don't mean to undermine anything that Jay and Gary have put together, but I don't really know a lot of seventh level as design type people. I've always jokingly but seriously said, yeah, I've always operated at 6.2, meaning that, yeah, I'm out of certain aspects of it, but there are times frequently that I'm in doing the one thing that I'm maybe best at. And frankly, I like that. That keeps me engaged. I would tell you that Gary is not a seventh level business owner as it pertains to Keller Williams. Gary's engaged, but he's engaged when he wants to be and when it's most effective. Right. So I look at it, Cody, what you're describing is like a 6.2. And to me, that's what expansion, frankly, my role within expansion was, hey, all these individuals are operating and building and growing, and I'm going to plug in where necessary. And obviously want to play just to my skill.
I think what you're speaking to is automatically like point one, researching opportunity. And if you research opportunity in that 13-point plan, that could be researching opportunity in a certain geographical area that you want to go, or a part of the country you want to be in, or maybe you're in one city and the business is dragging you to the city next door. Like, I don't know, but I do know that one of the opportunities is researching, how do I want this to look? Like, where do I want this to go someday? And someday someday is a weird number. I don't know. Like, people say things like begin with the end in mind. I don't know what the end is either. I got no idea. How far could this go? How big could it be? I don't know. Like, I don't know. And so when I think about like what Brian's saying, I would push you, be okay to dream out there 2 and 3 decades out. But if you pretend for a moment that you know what business looks like in 2 or 3 decades, especially in our industry, we don't know. Like, you don't know and we don't know, and we're okay with that. But you could look 3 and 4 years out.
I think when you're talking dreaming, though, and I love that, how you're saying it, you're also talking about a deliberate and purposeful effort to dream, which I know might sound silly. What I'm always concerned about as it pertains to expansion and those getting into it or those building is that instead of dreaming to the level you just described and forecasting and thinking about it and writing about it and coming back to it, because I know you do this. I think you're exceptional at this. Like you dream big, you think big, but then you kind of work backwards as to what the systems or people or models need to look like. Very deliberate dreaming. If you're not doing that, then you're just playing the game of what I call the game of more. The game of more. Like I just want more than I have today. And I personally believe that's a really dangerous way to business plan. Because obviously, number one, the journey is not going to be fulfilling if you're just playing the game of more, but it also prompts you to make more emotional decisions, not as purposeful, not as objective, right? So I think that, when we're talking about researching the opportunity, Cody, I mean, you've seen it, I've seen it as it pertains to expansion. How often have you heard, well, I got a friend in this city and I love to be in business with them. I should just go do it. Okay, I love that you've got to connect. And I love that you're passionate about maybe putting it together. But I think there's a little bit more research that goes into that, right?
100%. I mean, but let's flesh that out. Like that's not the horriblest reason to expand somewhere, but it could be.
Yeah.
And so this is where we're going to talk out of both sides of our mouth. And there's no way to go through these 13 points and not talk out of both sides of our mouth seemingly. Because we would say a dumb reason to expand somewhere is because you've always wanted a vacation there, or because you've got a friend in the business there, or your sister-in-law just got licensed in this city or state and she's awesome, so you should expand there. Those could be terrible reasons, but they could also be amazing reasons. I think what Brian is saying is more research needs to be done.
That's right.
Prove it, show it, prove it to me, walk me through it.
That's right. I mean, even when you say like my sister-in-law is there, I'm not going to immediately say, oh, if that becomes the only reason, I might take issue with it.
Right.
But if you've now validated, in addition to my sister-in-law being there, which by the way, that relationship, that trust, that's tough to create with someone you don't know that you may have with that individual. There's tremendous value to that. Many would argue that might be the number one thing, right? Like the fact that this person could run and be on an island and I don't have to worry about them to the extent I would somebody I'm cultivating a relationship with that I already have with this individual. That's a big deal. I just think you better support it beyond just that. Does my lead generation model work? Does, all of these things have to be validated.
People say things like they're absolutes. They say things like working with family never works out. That's not true. Like, it might be true. It's probably true for the person saying it. That's probably true, or they've never done it, and the only experience they have is that's how it's ended up. But we've got examples in our own industry and definitely in our own company that working with family has worked out incredibly well. I think
my mom's been with me 10 years now, Cody, in my business, and she's been the greatest hire I could have ever asked for. Absolutely, aside from Jason Abrams, of course, is my partner. I don't want to forget about him. But no, my mom, we have a contract between us. And to many, that may sound weird, but it's not for us.
Yeah, I mean, Jason likes to say that your mom may have birthed you into life, but he birthed you into business.
Yeah. Oh, I appreciate that of him. Yet another bad joke of his, I'm sure.
Right. But I think here's what I would write down based on what we're talking about, and then we'll move forward. I think for me, it's a matter of whatever those issues are. It's like a buyer's agent just moved to a different city or state. Like, one of my very first expansions was a killer buyer's agent in Portland who moved to Boise. And somebody would say that's a dumb reason to expand to Boise, but it was a great reason for us. Mm-hmm. And that buyer's agent was selling 6 or 8 homes a month. She already knew our systems. She also already knew, and I don't know how to say it besides saying it, at the time, I was directly managing the salespeople and the sales part of the business, and she knew how difficult I was to work with. She knew that it was high speed, super fast, and I'd be like a dog on a bone. I would be kind, but it was very intense. And then I would pull back, and we might not talk for days or weeks. And then I'd come back in and I'd be like this again. And she was totally good with it. And I think one of the important things to that is, regardless of what your styles look like, when you have somebody who works well with your style, that's hard to duplicate. Like, that's not something you can just go find at will. And that style worked really well for her. If we would have talked every single day about her numbers, she would have hated working with me. But there's another person who needs that, and vice versa. So anyway, now I'm just kind of rambling, but
no,
that was a perfect reason to go.
It's a really, really great point, something that could easily go overlooked. Like, when you were saying that, I was thinking to myself, yeah, that's kind of the reason why I brought the same 2 or 3 or 4 people into everything that I'm involved with.
Right.
Right. Like many of you, like Julie Youngblood has been alongside me. She's out of Vegas. She's a Keller Williams person, 21 years now. She's been with the company. Julie's been side by side with me in 4 or 5 different businesses over the past 6 or 7 years. Part of the reason, if not the biggest reason for that, is that she knows exactly my style and she works well with it. And by the way, I know her style and I work well with it. Right. And there's a comfort. Comfort, I don't want that to sound like a bad word here. There's this degree of trust. She knows when, she can tell my body language and know what I'm about to do or say, and I can do the same for her. And there's massive value. And bringing this back to the original point of the conversation, that is a great jump off point for an expansion relationship.
It's before we go to creating value proposition, because it's kind of all tying together.
Yeah.
one of the things that Brian and I would tell you again and again and again, it's almost like circling a drain. It's like watching water in a drain. It's all going to end up in the same spot sooner or later. And no matter what we talk about, and we're going to circle around 100 things that matter, in the middle, it's always people. Always 100% people, people, people. Like it's going to be people at some point. And so that's, to me, that's always the center of every dialogue. But researching the opportunity and thinking about what you work well with, I also want you to think, what does your business work well with? If your business is really good at what I like to call, blue collar real estate, then blue collar real estate is an easy place for you to lead generate, like making phone calls, knocking on doors, doing open houses. You might find this fast that your model sucks wind in downtown Miami. Your model maybe sucks wind in Beverly Hills or Santa Monica. Even though you might go, man, those price points are great. I like it. I like the feel, the vibe, all those things. But the flip is also just as true. If you're a killer and you're in Santa Monica or you're in Miami and that's how your whole business is built, it might be really hard to duplicate that business in Missouri. Might be really hard to duplicate that business even in Phoenix or in Seattle. We tend to think really fast that real estate's done the same everywhere, and it's truly not. The only thing that's truly the same is there's buyers and sellers and all the things that circle around that. But the ideas, the processes, and then just like Brian will talk to this, the agent population. What are they comfortable with? What's common there? Like Brian and I have traveled the country and like we'll laugh sometimes and be like, yeah, you probably can't say that in this city. Or if you use this example, everyone looks at you like you're nuts because literally nobody does that there. And so as you're expanding your business, this is exactly why that ink spot that we talked about at length at ESO is so big. Because if you're in New Jersey, anywhere up in that Northeast section is going to operate at least more like you than going to Phoenix or going to LA or going to Washington. And that's why we keep saying over and over and over again, you already know kind of how it's done. Just the gist of it. All right, anything on opportunity before we move on?
No, I mean, if we want to get more specific, like just some specific tactical things around opportunity. To Cody's point, whatever your lead gen model is, however you're generating business, you want to make sure that the market in the respective area that you're looking at supports that. If you're an open house model, what does that market need to look like if you're going to run a number of open houses? If you're an SOI based model, what does that community or market need to look like? So I would think, what is it I'm doing in my hometown and how can I find out? What kind of research can I do in that new area to see if in fact it could work? To me, and Cody, I know you do the same, I'm driving or I'm getting on a plane and I'm getting in that town. And I'm getting with people and I'm interviewing market centers. I'm interviewing agents. I'm talking to title professionals. I'm doing a lot of recon. I've made the mistake, Cody, that all those things you just described, I went to Southern California with my expansion. And we did 24 units in my first year there. And they were the hardest 24 units we ever did. And why did we go there? Because Jason wanted to go there. And why did Jason want to go there? Because the price point was high and he could wear those Gucci shoes he likes to wear and he'd fit in. And I'm not even joking. This is literally the reason I think we went to Southern California. Right. The price point made a lot of sense. We were enticed by that and we allowed that to jade our thinking a little bit. The truth is our model was not as community-based as Southern California real estate required. And as a result, while we got a couple deals a month, they were way too hard. It was tough. It was way too difficult.
It took you more work to do a couple than it did to do 10 or 15 somewhere.
I mean, we could do 3 or 4x that business with less lift. Right. And so it could be really sexy or enticing to go somewhere, but don't allow it to undermine, your model and what it is you stand for.
Here's what I want you to write down for what Brian just said. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. And I think about that a lot. Like I'll think, can I? And I go, yeah, yes. But then should I? Maybe, maybe not. And here's the other thing too, right? We stayed out of Southern California for a really, really long time. We're there now, and we're pushing the hell out of it now. But in 2011, 2012, 2013, like when I was first looking at Southern Cal, I was looking at conversations like Brian just mentioned. I got to watch them go and do that. And it's like, we're going to fail there. Like, we're going to completely suck. My business hasn't gotten big enough to incorporate that yet. And this is another point. Like, the bigger your business becomes, the more you can absorb. And you're like, all right, cool. Now we can actually add that. Now we could do that. And so there's an old saying, timing is everything. Timing is everything. Yeah. Like, just because I can't then, I mean, we were asked to go to England 5 or 6 years ago. And I remember laughing, going, dude, I'm sucking 30 miles away. I ain't going to England. Like, I might as well, I mean, I remember thinking I might as well take some money in the yard and light it on fire. Like, it's not going to work. But today we're in 5 countries. And we are actively, like, progressively searching out and looking for more opportunity in different countries. And so timing's everything. And so I want you to think about when you tell yourself, like we're great salespeople. And if you're expanding, you're a great salesperson at some level. The challenge is you're going to sell yourself on an idea. You have to be willing to say, just not today. Yeah. It's not ever. It's just not today. It's like, this isn't the right time. When you think about
if you're not the black hat though, invite one into your world.
Oh God, say that again.
No, I mean, when you were saying we're not great sales, I mean, we are great salespeople. What went in my mind is, yeah, we're great salespeople. We're not great black hats. So in my mind, if you don't have that black hat ability, if you can't poke holes in your plan, sure as heck better have somebody you can invite into your world that in fact can.
I liken it to this. As a salesperson in real estate, you and I think, how do I make the deal work? Mm-hmm. An amazing broker always asks, do we want it to work? You and I are like, how do we get it to close? A great broker, she's going to be like, hang on, do you want this thing to close? Because based on this and this and this, you might regret this thing closing someday.
Well, we're eternally optimistic. Like we're optimists. Like we think everything is possible, even more so when someone says it can't be.
Which is why you're here, which is why you're doing
exactly this. Right.
Yeah. All right. So value proposition, like we're going to bounce around and it's hard not to talk about one of these and color in the other ones. Yeah. But let's go to value prop and be really specific on value prop. When you were expanding with Home Helper, and by the way, why did you call it Home Helper Consultants? Why'd you go with a vague name and not a direct, like, why wasn't it Brian Gubernick? Besides the fact that's hard to spell, like, why'd you call it Home Helper and what would you do today?
It's funny. Home Savers was taken and I had to make a decision while at the corporate commission. So we went with Home Helper. And it was because many real estate teams were named after the individual. Frankly, in my own backyard, Gubernick is not the greatest name to have on a sign, but in my own backyard, it would have been valuable. But for whatever reason, I just never embraced the name on the team concept. I thought team or business is more than just the individual. I want to build a big business. I knew it at that point. And so Home Helper Consultants just made sense. Ironically, it served me really well when I went beyond my state's borders and built this bigger real estate business. I can't tell you, Cody, I saw that coming because I didn't. But I did see bigger business and thought having it around one individual just, in my mind, didn't make sense. And I certainly don't mean to offend anybody that does have their name on their business. As it pertained to expansion, though, I probably early in the early days, and you had United Home, I mean, you had something similar. In the early days, it wasn't a problem for me like it was for many that had their name attached to it. So for me, it was just always, I'm a bigger business than me.
Part of the name and part of the name that you choose is gonna dive back to the value proposition. For me, part of my value prop, and Brian and I have lots of friends who have giant businesses, bigger than either one of our expansions ever became. That it's based on a name, or the name is in it. So none of this is 100% right or 100% wrong. None of it is. And you've got to be careful. What do you want it to be? Here's what I do know. I do know that if I don't like the name, because I personally don't, just like Brian said, I just wouldn't do Cody Gibson. I just wouldn't do the Gibson I just wouldn't. Because I have a problem with it, I'm going to create problems around it. Like, just like, I mean, there's an old saying, nobody really does the work they don't want to do. Like, and everybody figures out a way to do what they do want to do. So I know for me, I don't like it, so I would struggle with it. At the same time, part of my value prop with my expansion is I want you to sit at someone's dining room table and think you own the business.
Yeah.
And if it says Cody Gibson Real Estate, someone's always going to ask, who's Cody, or where's this person, or something's going sideways. I really just don't want any problems. The only people who call the business line and ask for me would be like an attorney or the IRS. Like no buyers and sellers call and ask for me because my name's not anywhere, which to me is part of the value prop. But if you listened during ESO, Kristen Cole talked, and I asked her the same question. And I thought she was brilliant when she said, I have an internal name and an external name. Inside the real estate community, it's Kristen Cole Network. But there's a common name like the DBA, and that's Lifestyle Homes. And so everywhere she works, it's Lifestyle Homes of Scottsdale, Lifestyle Homes of Kentucky, Lifestyle Homes of whatever. But inside KW, which is where she's really well known, and inside real estate, where she's also really well known, it's Kristen Cole Network, because there is value there. One of the challenges that Brian and I had by not having individual names is there was no, it wasn't synonymous from our name to our business. Mm-hmm. And people be like, oh yeah, Home Helper, who is that? Or what's Brian's team? And so there's pros and cons. Everything cuts both ways.
Yeah. Pros and cons for sure. You know, you'll see crossing state borders without your name attached to it, typically from a legal perspective, is going to be simpler. But to Cody's point, attracting talent might be a little bit more challenging. I mean, you're 100% right, Cody. I mean, you had the same experience I had. I would show up in a new city, and especially early in the expansion days, and there wasn't a ton of us doing it. And Brian Gubernick was a very different or separate entity from Home Helper Consultants. Nobody had heard of Home Helper Consultants, but they had maybe seen me present or something like that. So that did make it a little bit heavier a lift for me, a little bit more challenging for sure.
The easiest value prop that you could offer in the beginning, like if you're in your first 1 to 5 or even 1 to 7 locations, easiest value prop is going to be lead generation or help around lead generation. That doesn't necessarily mean handing somebody leads. It might be coaching and training them on what you do exceptionally well that helps them go and earn leads. Don't forget that one of the values that you might bring is to be able to say, listen, you got a database of 800 people or 200 people. I could help you get more money out of that database with my systems than what you can get out of that database on your own. And sometimes that's the proximity of just working with you. Please remember that real estate is one of the most lonely businesses on the planet. Lonely. Like it can, I mean, and some people love that. And for them, it's great. For me, I don't like working alone. I like having people around me. I like being able to bounce ideas. I like being able to collaborate. Like for me, the whole team environment or expansion environment, I dig it. I like it more. But leads is always going to be some level of that early value prop, and it's probably going to be a value prop forever. It's one that's always going to win. But if you only do leads, here's talking out of their side of our mouth. If you only do leads, then what happens?
Yeah. You know, you're right. I look at, and I'm curious your thoughts on this, Cody, because whenever we talk about what's your value, the value proposition, I like to kind of break it into two different paths, there's two different categories or sections we're looking at here. We're looking at what's your value to the agents that you want to bring into your expansion world. We're also looking at what's your value prop to the consumer, and how is that, going back to research the opportunity, how is that going to influence those in that respective community to leverage you and your team? So when I think just around any business, forget about expansion for a moment, when I break out the business snapshot and I'm saying, okay, what's the value of this business? I think it's a two-pronged question. It's a two-part question. What's the value to the talent I wish to attract? And what's the value to the consumers that I hope buy my product or service? So like Cody, when you went expanding, and maybe you can give some more detailed answers here, right? Like, what was your value to agents, and what did you hope going into that new town was going to be your value to the consumer with respect to your real estate team?
One of the places that we failed was the value to the consumer. Other than we weren't really doing anything any other top agent wouldn't do. Like we weren't really doing anything that anybody else who was good at their job wasn't doing. Like a great contract to close, a great process, a great experience. Like we failed at that. Like we didn't do amazing with it. Where we did do really well was being very, very clear about the value proposition to our partner, to our agent. And one of the things I would push you to go do is it might be as rudimentary as writing down like the value proposition. And one of them might be like the way that we ultimately did it, which will slide across a table and show a partner candidate, here's the 15 things or 22 things or whatever it is that you have every day at your fingertips by being in business with me. And one of them is training and consulting. One of them is coaching. One of them is environment. One of them could be all the tools that you already pay for. Don't overlook that a lot of the tools you buy or pay for or you've mastered, you could duplicate somewhere else and you could use it somewhere else. But I want you to list out all the stuff. And if it's only 5 things, then it's 5 things. If it's 12, then it's 12. There's nothing wrong with either of those numbers, but put a price tag next to it. And I say all that to say this, like we'll show a partner, here's our value prop. And because it's value, like we put dollars next to it and we'll say, here's the 15 or 20 things. And here's what they would cost you if you bought them direct on your own. And so today what we can show somebody, and we're the ones who get to write the value on it. We'll show someone it's worth about $8,000 a month in direct tools and plugins that they use or can have if they're at United Home Group. There's $8,000 a month. And so the conversation we have is a business dialogue of, listen, for you to go and spend 8,000, you got to make way more than 8. You got to make 20 to pay taxes, pay yourself, and then have 8 left over to reinvest. And even then, I'm not sure most 20K earners would spend 8 a month. And the first time we ever did this, it was like 3,500 a month or 3,700. It was under 4. And like, as it's grown and as it's gotten bigger, we've been able to do more. We've been able to put more on the table. And so for me to show someone, here's $8,000, but here's the piece. And here's what I want you to get as the expansionist. You have to get really good at understanding it and then selling it. And being able to say, listen, like if I were talking with Brian, I would say, here's all the stuff I'm gonna put in front of you, but Brian, I need you to understand you could buy all of it without me. You don't need me to buy it for you. Like you could buy it all without me. But Brian's thinking, maybe, but I don't have $8,000 today, or I don't have $8,000 I want to invest today. The second piece to that is this, Brian, I'm gonna pay for this every month, even the months that you and I don't share commissions on anything. If you have a dry month and don't sell a damn thing, I'm still paying for all this. That's a massive value prop. But I have to help Brian understand if he's on his own and he buys any or all of these, what's he do the first time he has a bad month?
Yeah, he's canceling them all.
Yeah, I got to choose between my mortgage and my blah, blah, blah account. I'm choosing my mortgage. I got to choose between my kid's school and my whatever account. I'm choosing my kid's school, as you should. And so to tie a ribbon on this around the value prop, what will help people understand is we'll say, listen, and here's my example. You use your own, but my example is Brian. I'm like this rich uncle that you have that says, I'm going to help you open a restaurant. I'm going to prepay for all the stuff, but I'm only going to ask you to pay me back on the nights the restaurant's busy. The nights that it's not, you just use it. And that's kind of how I pitch the value prop on the expansion side. We're going to pay for it for every single month, whether you're doing well, great, or nothing. We don't know how to stop. And we're going to pay for it. Like that's a big deal. It's a big value prop.
It's a great presentation. And it makes a ton of sense. It makes me want to join United. But my original question to you about, it's interesting as you were saying that, I'm thinking to myself, okay, if Cody and team honor everything he just outlined, will he create better agents than the competition in that new city? The answer is absolutely. If he arms them with the right tools, trains and educates, pours into them to the level I know he will, and gives that $8,000 plus in value a month, will that translate into a stronger presentation, stronger service to the consumer at large? And the answer is yes. So my original question was like, hey, there's 2 prongs of this value prop. You've got how you attract agents and what you give to that community, what separates you. And I would say, based on what you just described, Cody, that you'd contend the way we develop our agents, the skills that they have and the tools that they have at their disposal makes them better for the consumer to use, right? I think about your agents probably go into a listing presentation with a menu of services. As a matter of fact, Kenny Klaus said to me yesterday, I was talking with Kenny Klaus, who's for those that don't know, Kenny is one of our top agents in the Southwest region and has been for 20 years now. And Kenny, and I said to Kenny in our conversation, I said, what do you think is different about real estate today versus, a decade ago? And he said, you know what? And I loved how he said this. He goes, the biggest difference for me is I used to sit across the table from the consumer and explain to them why my team or why I'm the right person to use. He said, today, I actually sit on the same side of the table and open up my menu of services and say, which one would you like to use based on your circumstances? And I share that with everybody because, Cody, that's your value prop, arming your agents with this menu of services so they're true consultants as opposed to selling like everybody else in the market. It's just an interesting thing to think around.
No, I think it's brilliant. Last comment on value prop, and then we'll go to culture. And by the way, the two do this. I mean, if you listen to our dialogue, you'll hear us covering all 13 of these at some level somewhere. But I do want to make sure that we scuba dive on a couple more of them. One of them, though, is the idea behind the value proposition and the culture. It's kind of like, you have to forgive the reference if it's not your cup of tea, but it's kind of like Sunday school rooms in a giant church. And that's kind of what expansion businesses look like. Like I remember I said to Gary once, I was like, why would they work with me when they could just be an agent at KW and get all of this stuff and go do all these things? And Gary kind of chuckled and said, you have to understand there's a difference. Everybody can, not everybody will. Everybody could. Everybody could take the stuff. Everybody could read the MREA book and march down the road and do it. But that doesn't mean that they'll do it on their own. That doesn't mean that you can't help them get there faster. It doesn't mean that you can't help them get there quicker or that you might not be just the right fit for them. One of the things I believe is that when you look 5 and 10 years down the road, teams are more popular than even today. And right now they're common. They're even more so common. I think expansion becomes more so common. I think you look out 3 and 4 and 5 years and it's just as common as teams. There's always a space. There's always going to be a space for a local agent who's incredibly like neck deep in their database and very hands-on. That agent's not going to go away. But the giant teams and the big expansions are gobbling up business across the country. The challenge I see is not for the agent who's very engaged one-to-one, it's for those people that are somewhere in the middle. Somewhere in these phases, like, oh my gosh, like that business is going to be lost to somewhere. Like when we go to a different city and start selling 50 or 100, which isn't a lot, but you start selling 50 or 100 homes a year, those 50 or 100 are coming from somewhere.
Yep.
How does this tie into culture? Like when you talk about building a unique culture, what should someone look for in expansion business building it to have a culture?
I think this does uniquely tie into the first two things we were talking around. Especially the last topic we were discussing. I think we overcomplicate this culture thing. I think of two things. Number one, being part of Keller Williams. I mean, look around, right? Like, I don't understand why we need to go everywhere to define what this is and learn what it's all about. What does Keller Williams have? How has this culture been created over the past 40 years? And how can I replicate it? How can I go out and do it within my own business? What is KW? I mean, I know we jokingly call it's cultish. There's no question, but what's a cult, right? Same dress, same talk, same acronyms, same diet. Now, I know we're not necessarily at the same diet, though Gary has tried us to get to drink those green drinks he has. But yes. Really, we just have a lot of things shared between us. I think we looked at Keller Williams, same trainings, all of that. But I think to simplify, I like to think to myself around my team's culture, my business culture. What is it we stand for? What do we stand for? What do we stand for alongside one another? What do we stand for as far as our service? What do we stand for? And then secondly, how do we demonstrate this on a daily basis? That's all I ever think about when it's like, oh, we've got to enhance or develop or define our culture. What do you stand for? And how are you demonstrating it every day? And I think if you I'm a big whiteboard junkie. Like I will sit in front of a whiteboard and write at the top of it, what is it that we stand for? Now, mind you, it says we, it doesn't say I. Maybe it starts with you, but does everyone else buy into that vision is a different question. What do we stand for? Why are we doing what we do? Why do we matter? Why do we matter to the consumer? Why do we matter to one another?
If you love if you love reading business books and talking about them, and you hire a bunch of people that don't, you're going to have a crappy culture.
It's going to be, you're going to be trying to force something on them, right?
Yep.
Like it's,
if you love events, going to things like putting together like a holiday event or a Thanksgiving event for your clients, like if you love that stuff and you hire a bunch of people that don't, you're going to have a crummy culture. Likewise, if you hire those that do, then you're swimming downstream instead of upstream.
This is going to certainly offend some, but that's okay because we definitely have to offend a couple people when we do these things. If you've got an SOI based business, if your business all comes out of your sphere in your database and you hire people, and again, I don't want this to come out the wrong way, but you hire people that aren't popular or are not likable, you're not going to like the business that you have. Right? Like when I say popular, I don't mean like they're in 5th grade and they win a popularity contest. I mean, do they have friends? Have they grown up in the area? Do they like to go out to restaurants and then talk about all over, Facebook, the restaurant experience? If they like it, you've got an SOI-based business, a community-based business, probably will jive. But if you're going to try to take somebody who's introverted and make them into a social butterfly, you're going to be really disappointed. It's going to have a direct impact on the vibe, the culture of that organization.
If you're hoping to be super deep on the SOI, like if that's like what Brian's talking to, you want the person that when someone doesn't choose them, they are almost offended.
Yeah.
You want the person that's like, oh my gosh, what do you mean? Here's what you don't want. You don't want the person, if that's the business you're building, you don't want the person that goes, who cares? Some will, some won't. So what? Who's next? Like, and there's a space for that guy too, but that might not be in your business looking at this. Let me talk out of the other side of my mouth for a minute. The bigger your businesses become, you might look down one day and say, I never worked, take your pick. FSBOs, geographic farming, expires, like take your pick. Maybe you never worked internet lead gen, whatever, it doesn't matter. Your business will grow to the extent that you say, oh, I want to bring that on, which is the next piece around a culture. You might have to look and go, where's my culture need to change? I want to bring these 4 different pieces of business into our company. We've never done them before, or it wasn't what I did when I was an agent. And please don't let that scare you. Just because you built your business directly based on these 2 or 3 channels, they should probably be the 2 or 3 channels you start with, but that doesn't mean you should only stay there. As you grow, you might go, all right, who am I missing? I'm missing a relationship. You might need to break the sales team and go, listen, I'm going to go hire a sales director who's 100% not like me. Listen to what Brian talked about with Jason. Jason's not Brian, but Jason could go and do what Brian couldn't. And so I'm going to go hire this person and they're going to build out this part of the company. It might not be what I love, but it's part of what the business needs.
And there's lots of important points there, but maybe the greatest one that you kind of breezed over, but just I want to emphasize it one more time. You said, maybe I need to introduce this strategy or this lever, but you didn't go to buying the tool. You didn't go to, I'm going to go learn it and teach it. Cody, you defaulted to, who do I need to bring in? And I know for many, you're like, all right, here we go again. Another Keller Williams course that says it's all about the who. Well, I can tell you firsthand, and Cody would do the same. We did the same thing. We'd sit in the rooms, we'd take the notes, and then we'd go do it on our own. And eventually, at some point in our career, probably Cody's before me, because it took me a little while. I'm a little bit more hard-headed, I think. You get that person, I'm telling you, you get that experience with that one person who goes out and drives it at a level you never could have. You're like, I'm addicted. I'm done. This is going to become the new sport for me. There's not a person I know that's built a really big business that did not make a sport out of finding awesome people to go introduce different things to their organization or to launch a new platform, whatever it may be. So to bring this back to the cultural component, like if you're about growth, if that's what it is you're standing for, then the people you have, the people you bring alongside you, they have to feel that way too. I love the saying, it's in virtually every KW course, but it certainly shows up in ESO. The old, you can't take a bulldog and make him into a bird dog. I always laugh because We're all so guilty of that. Like we've
100%.
all at some point in our career said, you know what? I know that rule, but this one time it's going to be different. I'm going to take this guy or girl who isn't like, they're not really from town. They don't really know a lot of people, but I'm going to teach them how to build relationships. I'm going to teach them how to be more likable. And yeah, every time someone puts their hand up and says, well, I had that guy and it worked. Yeah, you're the anomaly. You're the outlier. 99.9% of the time, you're not taking that bulldog and making him or her into a bird dog. It just doesn't work.
And one of the worst things is when it does work because you think it'll work twice. There's going to be a couple, again, both sides of our mouth. You're going to stumble into something or accidentally do something that works. And sometimes you got to look down and go, I kind of got lucky. I was in the right place at the right time, which you could argue if that's luck or not, whatever. I'm probably not doing this twice or 3 times. I'm probably not doing this again in my career. Or if I do, it's going to be super rare. Like this is just one of those one-off things. Not everything, damn it, has to be duplicatable. There's going to be some things you're like, yeah. I mean, if you look at relationships, like you might not duplicate that relationship with someone that you go, we got into business together at the right time, at the right career path, at the right juncture, and poof, it was amazing. Like you might not do that 10 times. One more thing on culture, and then we're going to talk about pro formas for a minute. I feel like we've talked about vision with a lot of this so far. But I do want to talk deep on pro forma for a minute. But one last thing on the culture, I think what's important is this. People need to know, and it needs to be defined, what are we doing every day and why? But the second piece is, who am I doing it with, and do I enjoy that? If they don't, it's a short road. If they don't, they're hanging out till they find a different opportunity or a different community. And you've got to be clear that you can't be everything to everyone. Like you can't please everyone. It might not be your thing. If you're super into something and it's like one of those core values and nobody else in your business is into that, that's going to be a challenge. That's going to show up, which is why Gary talks, when you hear him talk about hiring, he's really careful to hire people the best he can that share similar core values. That does not mean that they rubber stamp everything, because the challenge there is then you all look and act and think and do the same. That's a problem too. But he'll look and go, all right, is this person, does this person think the way I think? And he'll ask questions like, tell me about the last business book that you read. You'd be really difficult to hang out with or spend much time close with Gary if you're not some level of a voracious reader. Because he's always talking about whatever book he was just in, or whatever thing he was just reading, or whatever article he was just in, and those things click with him. So he has to find people that are like that. Last thing on culture too is, where are you going? How's life look in 2 or 4 or 5 years? If you can't paint a picture for someone and help them understand where they're going to be in 3 years or 5 years, or how you're the bridge to help them move there, then you're going to have a culture of a revolving door. No one's happy. Let me say it again, and it's worth writing. If you take nothing from today's mastermind, no one's happy staying where they are. Every single person thinks, whether they share it with you or not, what's next? What do I do after this? What's my next door? What's my next opportunity? What we do, though, is we build these businesses, especially in real estate, where we basically say you're doing a great job, and if you're lucky and you work hard, you could still be doing this in 5 years. And that sucks. Like nobody wants that. It's
one of the reasons why you'll see, like, I don't know the exact amount. I'm going to say I read it was somewhere around 3/4, called 70%. 70% of the corporate workforce is on monster.com or one of the job sites on a weekly basis. Now, it's not their intention necessarily to leave that role that they're in, but what are they doing? They're curious, obviously, how does their pay compare to other people doing their job?
Right.
But they're also curious about, what am I missing? What else is out there? If I were to move, which I probably won't, but if I did, where might I go? And so that is happening in your real estate team, in your real estate business right now. In my mind, well, we better be thinking about that. We better be addressing it. And as it pertains to culture, to tie this out, much like all of these topics, if you're not studying companies that have constructed amazing cultures, or companies that have clearly defined their value prop, or companies that research opportunity, how their expansion look, this may not be the path for you to go. Like, in other words, if you're not taking this seriously as a business owner, I'm not knocking you. If you want to stay in the role that you're currently in as a real high-performing real estate agent, by all means, go ahead. But Cody, I think you'd say, like, when you went down this path, you had to up your game, not just like 2x. You had to go 5, 10x. And that was going to be studying, reading, asking questions, attending things like this. I mean, at an extraordinary level, right?
The earlier the business, the more your culture looks like this. It looks like your culture.
Yeah, it's
The
you.
bigger the business, the more it does this. And this is where people really fail. If they can get through this phase, they think it's going to stay this way. It's not. Look at how large KW is today, and look at all the things within KW that might not be Gary's thing. He's like, it's not really my thing. I'm not interested in that. But there's 12,000 people in the company who are. Or there's 25, like it's important. You're going to do this. And if you could do this long enough, then you're going to do that. And you just got to be ready for it. And this is where the who matters. Like, who am I missing? I need a director at this or director at that. I need someone who's going to be a champion and go do this. The bigger the business gets, the wider that culture is going to go. Part of the culture might be money. Part of the culture might be success. Part of the culture might be like ringing the bell every time that you make a sale. You bring in someone who hates that and they think it's cheesy, that's going to be a struggle for them.
Yeah.
Here's what I'll say on the pro forma though. When you're building out a pro forma, don't overcomplicate this. Like my rule of thumb, I mean, Brian's the accountant, but if I can't write it on a sheet of paper and understand it and show it to someone, it's too complicated. Like it's too difficult. But the pro forma model is simply said, if I take this business and I duplicate it or run it or drop it over here, what am I going to make? How do I make it? What am I going to spend? And then what am I going to keep? Like at the end of the day, those are the important conversations to have. In the pro forma model, I think the only conversation we skip is timing. You might find that when you were a real estate agent building your business, your pro forma, which you didn't have, you just went out and worked hard, you were profiting and making money month 3, month 4, month whatever. In expansion, you may look and go, I might just be feeding this for 6 months. It might be like feeding the meter. Like I might just be putting money in for 2 months or 2 years. Brian, what would you say on the pro forma as it relates to what we're doing that's different than just building out your own sales business?
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, the goal of expansion, the goal of any business is going to be profit. Like that's why you're playing this game. That's the sport that we signed up for. Yes, there are many other things that come along on that journey, impacting, the people you bring into your world, helping consumers, all of that stuff matters deeply. But at the end of the day, none of that exists if you're not running a business that actually generates income. So as it pertains to expansion, the math matters. It matters for a whole host of reasons. You as the owner, you as the business driver, if there's not an ROI on your time, then it's not a path you should take. In other words, when you go and expand, even if it's 10 miles away from where you're presently at, it's safe to say that even if you have all the right people in place, there will be an added degree of stress and sophistication challenge to your world for at least a period of time, if not indefinitely. And I think there's an element of that that's acceptable if the math makes sense, if it gets you closer to where it is you want to ultimately be. So absent, though, of running a pro forma, absent of actually understanding the math, I don't know how you decide whether certain things or levers or positions or paths that you take, how you actually determine they make sense. So Cody, I don't think we have to overcomplicate this one. I think the reason Gary focuses on this in the snapshot is that many of us have all of these skills to generate relationships, generate business, and attract people. We're really good at that. And realtors historically look at their math last, look at the numbers last. P&L conversations, income statement conversations, those are business person conversations. And to your point, Cody, like if you want to just have the backyard business that does 2-3 deals a month, you can live a really big life, more power to you. I'm not trying to say don't go do that. However, if you're getting into the expansion game, you're starting to build a real business, no longer a practice. Right? When I use this example, Cody, I love my father-in-law. He's a stud. He's one of my favorite guys on the planet. He's a dentist. He's in practice in Phoenix. I love him. I'll talk to him about anything except business. I just don't want to talk to him about business. And I don't mean it to offend him, but the reality is he doesn't run a business. He runs a practice. And then what do I mean when I say that? If he shows up to that that practice, he generates some revenue. When he goes on vacation for 8 weeks during the summer, he no longer makes any money. He doesn't know how much money he makes every month. He just knows that it pays the bills and allows him to do what it is he wants to do. And that's awesome. That is great.
There's nothing wrong with that.
There's nothing wrong with that. But that is a practice, and that's what a lot of real estate, agents run. It's awesome.
Yeah, stop right there though. Imagine Brian's father-in-law saying, you know what? I'm pretty good at this. I'm going to go open 15 dental businesses in 15 different states. Works for me. Probably just going to multiply it by 15. Maybe I won't make quite as much, but I'll make half as much 15 different times. Probably wrong.
Well, and that's where I ultimately
100% wrong.
Story, because when he starts, like any entrepreneur, he's like, oh, I'm just going to go across town and do the same thing. I'm like, oh, how are you going to generate business? Well, I'm going to put dentist on top of the building. It's going to say dentist. And I'm like, I'm out, dude. I'm out. Like, I love you. And I know if we go down this path, it's going to turn into a conversation. I'm not, maybe someone else, I'm here to, someone not related to me. I'm looking to coach or train or mentor or whatever, not my father-in-law. So my point is though, when you start going down this path, the math matters, and it matters more than ever before. Right. And to your point, Cody, like it might take longer, but in order to get comfortable with it taking longer, you got to buy into this longer term vision that only can be validated by the math, the mathematical equation that you need to be putting together.
I'll say a couple little things on this. If you can't put it on a sheet of paper and explain it to somebody in less than 5 minutes, it's too complicated. Like it's just you've made it too difficult. Remember, this pro forma is not something that you're using to go and get a giant corporate loan. Like that's a whole different thing. But the other piece is this, like this is one of those little gut checks. Like, okay, cool. I've got this pro forma. I'm going to spend this. We're going to pay this. We're going to split this. We're going to do all these things. I can explain it to my friend in 5 minutes. Hey, you're in real estate. Let me explain this to you. Would you ever consider investing in this business? I'm not even talking about a lot of money, $5,000 or $10,000. If they're like, no way in the world would I want to do that. That might be a pretty good gut check that you don't have a great pro forma yet. The other thing on the pro forma, when I did mine, it was garbage. It's kind of like doing a 411. The first handful I did were garbage. My first 15 411s, garbage. Like someday they become good. Like my first 135, terrible. 25 in, got better. But I thought that I was going to lose money in expansion for 3 years. I was like, I'm probably going to be upside down. Like the way that I want to go do it, I'm probably going to be upside down for 3 years. I remember telling myself, I'm going to expect the worst. It's probably more like 2 years. It actually ended up being 5 years. Not only was I wrong, I was wronger than I even thought I was wrong. Like I was wronger further than my worst case scenario, which I was like, well, probably 2 years. We'll call it 3 just to be safe. It was actually 5. I do want you to look at the pro forma model and remember this. You built a real estate sales business or sales practice, whichever it is that you have, by some of those deals, you keeping 100% of the money. By some of those deals, not having very many expenses. When the second you go into expansion, remember 100% of the deals, we'll just call it 50-50. 100% of the deals automatically go to 50%. And that's your best case scenario. That's common. On top of that, you have expense on every single thing that you touch. So never again will you end up with that $12,000 or $15,000 commission check where you keep all of it. It will never again happen. And I think that's one of the things that, at least for me, I didn't make very much money, at least not a lot of money before real estate. This was my first time ever touching that kind of money. And so I was surprised how small all the checks became and how many of them we had to have. And so this is why we tell people, run your hub and run the expansion business. They do this, but there's a hub and there's an expansion business. And one of the greatest things I've seen, if I've done one thing well, and it's copied from others, is I've always been at a place that I could shut down the entire expansion and have a hub. I could shut down the entire expansion business and have a solid team running over here. And I think that's an important thing to remember. As much as we say operate them together and cohesive, like my ace in the hole is always, if this whole thing failed, if this whole thing died, I've got this massive MREA level business back here in Portland that I can just come back and run and just make $1 million a year with. That's a pretty good fallback plan.
It's a nice fallback. I would say, the last thing around Pro Forma, as you're saying this, it makes me think, you should know the math of that expansion, because the truth of the matter is that expansion is pretty much or somewhat similar to any other investment opportunity that you may have in front of you today. In other words, you've got to know what this business is capable of, what your investment's going to be, both in terms of money and time. And you should be asking yourself the question, if I allocated this time and money elsewhere, what kind of return might I be able to get? Like, I know this might sound trivial to some, but I'm always thinking in terms of rental properties or other avenues, other passive income opportunities. And early on, Cody, with expansion, my objective was I want to net $100,000. That was the baseline. I need to see a path to $100,000 per location. That was just the floor. That was like my baseline, rough math in my head. Can I get to 100? And I was asking that because there were other avenues I could potentially go, be it market center or investing in rental properties or whatever it may be. There are other ways to go make money. What is more fun? What's lighter lift? What has a lower barrier to entry? What aligns with my long-term plan? Again, I like to look, now it's never going to be apples to apples, but you've got to figure out the math over here on expansion and be able to compare it and contrast it. Now, Gary would tell you it's not an or conversation. You're not doing this or that. If you're thinking about doing or, you're probably missing people, and that would be exactly right. But when you break into the expansion world and you're building, it is a fair analysis to be done.
And it's and. Very, very smart. The business plan and the pro forma, they don't look identical, but there's a whole lot of commonalities. Here's what we'll say about the business plan, and then I want to go right to the org chart. The business plan might be an absolute duplicate of what you currently do in your hub, but don't assume that it is. It very well could be. Like if you're expanding somewhere similar with a similar price point, similar type of agent, similar lifestyle, all those things. Like I love Brian's example that you heard at ESO where he said, I thought that everybody drove an hour or two to take listings. And the first, when I went to Seattle, I realized that in that market, like they wouldn't drive an hour mostly to go take a listing. It's a great point to make. And it was something that I heard Brian say back in 2011 and 2012. And I was like, that's interesting. Like I wouldn't have thought that, but it might be an absolute layover. And so I feel like, again, we say things and they're absolutes. They're not absolutes. If you're going to expand from this city and you're going to go 50 miles to this city, you could probably duplicate your entire business plan and be like, we do it this way, we market this way, we prospect this way, we ask these things, we use these analogies. Like these all make sense. Like that might be an absolute layover, but it might not be. And that doesn't mean that you should or shouldn't go there. What I would say on the business plan is this, and we'll move forward from it. One, it is not set in stone. You're not stuck with it. If you need to change the damn thing, change it. Like you might have a short-term and a long-term business plan. You might go, listen, for 6 months or 9 months, we're going to run this play. And you might go, as soon as we can stop running this play, we're going to stop and we're going to pivot over to this one. This is not something that you're never going to change again. I mean, if you watch, Brian and I have been around KW for a long time. And we could talk about initiatives that have come up in KW that aren't here anymore. But they were there that day. And they were amazing for 2007 or amazing for 2010 to 2014. Like you got to remember, this whole thing around you is constantly going to evolve. 10 years ago, you weren't worried about how many 5-star reviews you could get. Today, if you don't have a system that generates 5-star reviews, you're stupid. Like you should have a system that generates 5-star. I shouldn't call people stupid, but that's a dumb business. You should have a system that says, here's how we go and get 5-star reviews. Like here's how we ask for them. I got a text this morning from somewhere that I bought something from the other day. In fact, it was shoes. I bought shoes yesterday at a running store. This morning, that running store texted me saying, if you liked our service, would you please give us a 5-star review? And here's the link. We didn't do that 10 years ago. There was probably somebody really smart doing that 10 years ago, but it wasn't me. But it is me today. Like,
That's because you run Ask Jeeves.
Right. Yeah. That's why I brought up Jeeves. Yep. And so your business plan, again, I'm a one-pager guy. If you can't fit it on a page, you're probably not going to run it. Like, it's too complicated, just too complicated.
I'm not really, I'm not married to a method. It's the same way you just described, Cody. Like, what I hear you saying, or at least the way I internalize it, business people have P&Ls and they have business plans and they have org charts, which we're going to talk about. And real estate practitioners don't necessarily need it. You know, if your org chart or your model looks like this and you're in the middle of that, that's you. You're just hustling. You're making noise and you're creating waves and you're keeping 100% of some checks. And that could be a hell of a business.
Yeah. No one said that's bad.
That's not, I never, ever want to take away from something like that. This model, while chaotic, is also highly lucrative in many situations, right? There are many that run this model and net 70% and they live the life they want to lead. I'm very proud of you. Keep doing it. The second you want to get beyond this and get into expansion and these bigger businesses, now business plans and P&Ls matter at a level 10x what it did when it looked like this.
I just think it's interesting. Like, I like the game of it, the game of having to understand a business plan, or the game of having to understand an org chart, or watching one grow, or saying, here's where I want it to go and who do I have to become for it to get there. Like, that stuff's interesting to me. I like that. I'm more interested in that than I am in selling the next house. And so to me, it's like, at some level, it just becomes business. But I'll say this on the org chart, Brian brought up like the percentage. I've never been the guy who's that hung up on netting 40 or 44 or 62 or 35. Like, you won't hear me very often saying or quoting some number that we net, which is also why I was the guy completely okay with saying, I'll just lose money for 3 years. Ended up being 5. But the birds of a feather, like the same guy who's not going to quote that number is the same guy that goes, if I got to lose money at this for 3 years, cool, I'll still be there. Like, we're going to figure this out. I will say the percentage, don't kid yourself. The agent that says I keep 85% of my money, I need to know how much the money is. If you're talking about 6 transactions a year, great, but that's not the business I want to build. Now, if you could show me 600 transactions and you keep 85%, I want to know every single thing you've done to get to this point. Like, that's interesting to me, which neither of those is wrong. It's just, which one am I going to follow? And I think what we do is we make the mistake of not asking questions. We put someone on stage and they make a comment like 90% of my business is referrals. Sounds amazing, but I want to build a business that's thousands of units. If you can do 90% referral based with thousands of units, I'd like to know every single thing you do, when you wake up, when you go to bed, and how you get dressed. Like, I'm going to mirror you. But if you sell 8 homes a year and you're 90% referrals, you probably make a great income. That's awesome. But I don't want to talk about it with you because it's not the direction I want my business to go. And I think that we have this polarizing thing where we have to make people wrong. Literally no one's wrong. If you like what you got and you like what you're doing, like Brian's father-in-law, dude, go have at it. That's awesome. Go do more of it if you want to. That's amazing. I'm not here to make anybody wrong, but I am really clear on where I want my business to go. And if I'm not careful, whoever I'm listening to is who I start becoming.
Yeah, becomes the prophet in a sense. And you said it earlier, like birds of a feather, like you do like start gravitating towards that. I hear you 100%. So,
org chart.
Yeah, I was going to go to org chart. You know, this is always a fascinating conversation to me. I know we don't have a ton of time to spend on it, but how you watch, having been part of expansion for a while, as I have, and taught ESL alongside you, Cody, and you've been in this world for a while. I love seeing these teams that have grown and expanded tremendously, and how their org charts went from this small mom and pop style real estate team to a corporate structure that looks like KWRI. It's just mind blowing to me, that growth and that evolution. Cody, when just for you, I haven't really had a chance to talk to you a ton around your org structure, but I do know I'm your partner in some businesses. I know you're driving expansion for KWRI, and I know your team's all over the place, which leads me to believe that in order to do these things that you do, you have tremendous leverage in your world, which means your org chart, which I know was a heavy you were like me, we started here. How did you get from A to Z in the manner that you have? What were the, what did you experience org chart wise? What models did you try? Maybe didn't work. What models did in fact work? Like, how did you, because you've really kind of experienced the gamut of org chart iterations, I'm guessing, from regional models.
Constantly fluid, right? And I think that would be the first point on an org chart. If it stays the same for very long, that means the business probably isn't growing. So like we write an org chart with the intention of changing the damn thing. We want it to change. We want it to grow. We want it to look different. The only way that I grew through the org chart challenges was I was always willing to pay somebody probably a little bit more than the job was worth. Now the challenge was, it meant that I had to take less. But if you look at, I'm 41 today. And when I was really like deep building expansion, which I'm still right there, but when I was really struggling about like, man, I'm short on money, I was 35, 36, 37. And I kept telling myself, I don't need a ton of money right now. If I do the right things and I'm making a bunch of money in 10 years or 20 years, great. Like I'm good. Like it's almost like I just keep throwing something into an account, hoping that it actually grows like a seed, right? And so I was always willing to share more of the dollars. But that might look different if I'm 60 or 70 and I'm thinking about, well, how do I keep what I've got? Like right now I'm thinking, how do I build something huge and then we get to enjoy it for 20 years or 30 years? But it's just it's a difference of what you're willing to, where you are and what you want it to look like. But I also, here's what most of you will do. Most of you will keep your money from your own sales. And a friend of ours that Brian and I are both close to, one of the ways that they built their expansion business was they said, I'm going to go and live on 2 sales a month. I'm going to do 2 sales every month and I'm going to keep the commission from those 2 sales. Those are going to be my sales. That's what I'm going to live on. Everything else in the business, I'm going to pump it back into the business. I'm going to take 2 sales and I'm going to live on that, which for most of us in most markets might be 16 grand, 20 grand, 25, like whatever your numbers are, right? Nothing wrong with that. What I did instead of that was I didn't take real estate sales, I taught. And so for me, I could teach. And so my teaching income for the first 5 to 6 years that I had an expansion business, that's what I lived on. And all the money in the expansion business was like a bucket. It just got reinvested and put back in, put back in, put back in. But instead of living on sales, I went and taught 1 or 2 days a week, sometimes 3 days a week. And there's a cost to that too. Most of you, what you'll do is you might look down and go, I've got a great business in Cincinnati and I want to start expanding into all these other cities. You might have to look down and go, great, to get the money, I'm going to pick up 2 sales a month. I haven't had to touch a sale for 2 years. But maybe you go, I'm going to go and take 2 sales a month, and that's my living income, so I don't need it from over here. So I can pour it back in, pour it back in. Almost everything you do, including an org chart, my question is, for how long? I'll do anything. Like if I got to clean the toilet, I'll clean the toilet. But my question is, for how long? If I'm a terrible accountant, but if I had to be the accountant, okay, we're probably in trouble, but for how long? Like for how long do I need to be in this role? Because I can do it. I'll force myself. And you might look at it and go, you know what? I've been 7th level for X amount of time, which is why I'm wanting to expand. But I'm going to go back to level 3 at some level in my business to find dollars. And I'm going to take the dollars from here so I can pour them in over here.
So what I hear you saying, which I never thought I'd associate these terms with you, Cody, but it takes a degree of humility and lowering of ego to do what it is you just described. And it's not just a financial thing. I mean, there are many of us right now that are running really, really big, high income businesses. And what Cody's saying is stop taking that income to go do the things that you're presently doing. And in a sense, reinvest or invest them back into the business and make a degree of sacrifice, which means that lifestyle creep that may have occurred has to be dialed back down. That is, I mean, this is one thing we don't talk about a ton as it pertains to expansion, is the degree of humility that it takes and the ego management that it takes, because you're going to be taking less off the table because you're playing the long game. And while you're playing that long game, most of your peers in the industry, like this year, are having their best year ever.
Up until
their car's a little nicer than it was the year prior. Their house is a little bigger. And if you're around that, and it's challenging, it's hard, right?
Up until 3 years ago, every manager and leader in my business, in the expansion business, made more money from it than I did. Now, the last 2 years, there's only been one person who makes more money than I do in the expansion business, in my expansion business. But even this year, the person who runs it with me, he'll make more money than I will from it. But he wakes up and goes to bed thinking about it all day, every day. Like, that's his everything. For me, it's one thing that I do. It's one thing that I touch. And I'm like, I don't know, like, I'm really good with that. Like, I'm completely fine with that. I don't need to be the highest paid person in my company. I believe someday I might, but I don't need to be right now. And I'm happy to pour it back in. I'm happy to buy that leverage. I'm happy to buy, like, I don't want the problems. And I'd rather, maybe it takes me 5 years longer. I'm completely okay with that, because I would have self-combusted or I would have fallen apart and I couldn't have focused on anything else. Last thing on org chart, and then I want to talk about like 5 key empire builders, which is kind of where that dialogue takes you. With the org chart, please don't do it alone. Like, have somebody, whether it's your number 1 person or your number 2 person or your coach or a friend. Like people have better ideas than you do when it comes to this stuff, because you see your business only through your lens, and I see mine only through my lens. Brian sees his only through his. Brian would do a better job. It's no different. Let me say it like this. I've got kids and Brian's got kids. I'll bet you that my kids would be better behaved at his house than they are at mine.
And vice
I'll
versa.
bet you,
For sure.
and his would come to my house and eat broccoli, and he'd be like, they never eat broccoli at home. But like, you get my point. Like, you're just like, that's just the way it is. If Brian stepped into my companies today, all of them, he would do a better job running them for the next 30 days than I would. Not because he's smarter or better, though he might be in a lot of ways. It's because he brings a perspective that I don't have. So don't do the org charts alone. Like, don't do it alone. But no org chart is built to stay. Every org chart is built to change. And if it's not, it's the wrong org chart. And your org, there's nothing wrong with it being on a Post-it note. If it's that small, then it's that small. Every one of us had an org chart that small one day. And the bigger your business gets, the more you're going to want your org chart in some level to go back to a Post-it note size. You look at the size of companies that Gary has built, like Gary will tell you his goal today is to shrink what that looks like for him, and then have other people's org charts inside of his. Like, that's what a giant business looks like. All right, so key empire builders. We've got about maybe 8 minutes or 10 minutes left in the mastermind, but what's important to know about your 5 key empire builders? You mentioned, I'm going to guess that Julie Youngblood is one of yours.
Yeah, she has been for a little while. And I think, you know, real quick around this, the 5, I think as a business leader, as an expansionist, as the CEO, if you will, of this expansion business, I think your job is relatively simple in terms of outlining it. Performing these tasks are challenging. But I really think, Cody, you're what? You're responsible for casting a vision. You're responsible for setting the tone. And then lastly, and arguably most importantly, you're responsible for building and working a Rolodex. Like, you're responsible for finding people. That's your job. And so I think that when it comes to the 5, I mean, I do literally, and I think anybody that knows me knows how seriously I take this. Like, I am thinking about my Rolodex, my people, who's in my phone all of the time, nonstop. And I've learned, as you probably have, I've had many relationships in my world where years ago I would have said, there is no way or no chance that we'll ever be in business together. And then 4, 5, 6, 7 years later, I'm deeply embedded. Cody, you might be a great example of that. You and I have known each other a while. I don't think I would have said I never would be. Like, you just don't see how your worlds intersect. And here we are today, in business together. I mean, it's just a funny thing the way that happened. So as it pertains to the 5, I'm thinking, who do I need to have in my world that have similar values, think big in the same way, want to go do something big or something even bigger than I ever thought about doing? And how do I get in relationship with them? And I literally make that my job. I believe that wholeheartedly. Like that is where I'm at. And that is the only way I'm going to grow, is being purposeful around that. And I think we expansionists can always do a better job here, thinking about people, moving it further up the priority list, as opposed to coming from a position of pain, which is, I'm not growing, I got to go find somebody. No, it should be the opposite.
You might talk to someone today, Brian, and when you think about an empire builder, you might be working with somebody where you could be talking about multi-million-dollar businesses, or like you could own a jet in a few years if you keep on this track. Like this is awesome. Let's keep doing it. But there was also a day in your business where an empire builder was doubling the size of your database.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that we do is we think empire, and like, I don't know about you, but I immediately think like Roman Empire, because that's what an empire is to me. And it seems huge. And so what I tend to do if I'm not careful is I get lost in a big picture and I forget what's the empire right now. Like, what's the short-term empire? The short-term empire might be taking the database from 2,000 to 5,000. And the person who helps you do that, that's an empire builder during that season. And one of the greatest things you could think of, and this was said to me, it was, I don't know where Jason Abrams stole it from. He stole it from somewhere, but he said, as the seasons change, so does the gardener. And when I think about like empire builders, there's different levels of your life or business where you need a certain type of person. Like maybe it's a wartime general and a peacetime general, or whatever that looks like. Just know that it changes. And I want you to come back and think like very narrow. What's the empire right now? There was somebody who's incredibly successful who, when they were working with me, they took our expansion business from like 25 or 30 locations to like 75 in 16 months. And ultimately, at the end of that 16 months, we got out of business together. And it wasn't because he was a bad guy or a bad person or didn't do a good job. In fact, he did a freaking amazing job. But I was looking and saying, what does next season look like? And like as an athlete, I'm like, that's not the quarterback I need for next year's team. As much as they're great and I can't afford 2 of them, we're going to part ways. Maybe it'll come back someday. Maybe it'll change someday. I don't know. But when you look at like that org chart and you think about those empire builders, it doesn't mean it's a life sentence. Brian and I are in business together today. Are we in 25 years? I don't know. If we are, it's because it makes sense to be. And if we're not, it's not because he's a bad guy. It's just that was a season, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Nah, that's such a great point. I love that. And you went Roman Empire, so you were thinking Caesar instead of Liggett, Cody. I think that's what happened.
I wasn't thinking Liggets. I should think Liggets and yes. Yeah. The Roman Empire. First key hire. Here's what I'll say. We paint this with a brush. And when you listen to the story behind the story, Gary will tell you like one of his first key hires took him 3 mishires to make the key hire. We have this idea sometimes that if our first hire isn't amazing, we don't get to redo it. Like, oh, well, I screwed that one up. Like that's not, no, you may have to try 3 times for that first key hire. And like in the MREA book, Gary talks about 3 key hires truly at a 7th level business level. But you might go through 8 people in those 3 roles. As those roles change, like the guy who runs the sales division for our expansion business, he started with our company in 2013 as a partner. Today, he's running the sales business in 115 locations in 5 countries. But he started as a partner. At that time, he could have never done what he's doing today. He grew up in the company, grew up in the business. But when I hired him for that role, I didn't see him in this role. Like I didn't know that was going to happen 8 years later. I'll bet he didn't either, which is why sometimes I chuckle when people say begin with the end in mind. I don't know. I'm not a future teller. I don't know what it's going to look like. I know we're going to work hard and I know we're going to do our best.
Yeah, when I think first key hire, especially as it pertains to expansion, in my experience, both in doing it as well as working with and coaching others or being alongside them, you're probably looking at one of three spots. It's just my opinion here. You either have a very key hire or a bigger hire to make in your admin, in your operations staff. So I would assess my ops and my admin department and say, do I have that person? If the answer is no, that might be the first really big key hire that you need to make prior to expansion. If in fact you have that person, now this is first key hire when you go to expand. If in fact you have that person, then I would say, obviously the next location, that leader on the ground may be that key hire. However, there's one more spot I think gets overlooked. And that's that spot that you currently fill in the hub. If you have, like for me, Cody, when I expanded, I wanted to be the guy driving this expansion, which means I had to pull back from home base to go plug into the other areas that we were building. However, I had to replace my day-to-day. And I made a mistake, shocker. I made a mistake of saying, you know what, I can still do the day-to-day and then still go hustle and go build expansion. And what ended up happening was I got excited about traveling to Seattle and Portland and doing these things and neglected my duties back home, and the home team flatlined. So I missed the key hire that was replacing myself. So what did I do? I doubled down on that mistake and plugged somebody into the role out of pain. And of course that backfired, and I had to walk it all back and then go find that key hire before I could go back out and expand. So again, I think there's three areas I would look to. Who's running my ops and admin, and are they great? Not good, but great. Who's my first expansion partner? And if I have that great person, great. If I'm going to go drive, do I need to replace myself at home? I'd be looking at those three spots as it pertains to first key hire.
And great's going to look different. Great in 2015 doesn't look like great in 2017 for you. Great in 2022 isn't going to be great in 2025. I hope that great in 2022 for you is someone that you're like, how'd they get in the business by the time you get to 2025? It'd be cool if everyone just grew with you, but working with you is not a life sentence. And so when you look down, you go, man, we're constantly leveling up the business. You can't level up the business without at some point leveling up the people some of the time. Now, some people have just this huge capacity to grow, and the more you put in front of them, they just chew through it like Pac-Man and keep going, and that's awesome. But you're never going to build a business with only those players. You're going to have some that go, man, I'm amazing at operations until you put 200 units a year down. Like, I can't do 200. I'm the best on earth at 125, but 200, I'm going to implode. You put me at 800 or 1,000, peace out, man. I'm gone. I don't want to do that. That's not what I want. And so I think we get this idea sometimes that hiring someone or an empire builder or building your world or running a training and coaching business that somehow looks like forever. None of this is forever.
Yeah.
Like none of this is forever. And I think that, I mean, I don't know, we only have 2 or 3 minutes left, but when Gary said once, he said, the only relationships that really, really matter forever are the ones that might be there at your deathbed. Like, make sure you take really good care of those. The rest might be a season. Like maybe, you know, I don't know, the team leader is the team leader for 3 years because she's great, but maybe she's not the team leader for 10 years. So what? That doesn't mean you don't want to stay in the same role forever and ever and ever either.
Mm-hmm. That's well said. No, I love that.
All right, so the key hires, I want to make sure this gets said. Brian said it was operational, which is operational admin, probably together. Sales, like the partner. What's the third key hire to you if you're going to build a successful expansion business?
What am I thinking? You know, I had mentioned replacing myself.
Got it. That's right. That's right.
Yeah,
because you're saying replacing yourself with the hope that the hub continues to grow.
Well, and if it's not replacing yourself, if you're going to stay in your current seat, then it begs the question, and this is the individual you were talking about that grew the organization from 35 to 75, you're going to have some driver of expansion, right? So it's either going to be you, right, or you're going to empower somebody who's going to drive if you go beyond that one location and you start growing, as many of you will. So your hub is powerful, your expansion location or location leaders are powerful, but then there's somebody who's responsible for for driving that growth. We have a number of different titles, from director of growth to director of expansion to just partner. Right, going back to the Jason-Brian relationship, I built the ops and I ran the business. Jason's responsibility was grow the business, right? Like, for those that have been around KW for a while, we've had a few different players in executive seats. And there was a guy named Mark Willis, who many of you guys remember. And I remember Gary telling the story. Mark had to make a determination one day. Was he going to run the company, or was he going to grow the company because it had reached a certain level? Right. And Mark opted to go run and lead. And what did they do? They then brought in the individual who was solely responsible for growth. So Jason and I structured our business. We drew a line down the middle of a piece of paper and said, this is run, this is grow. I'm doing these things, that says run. You're doing these things, that means grow. Let's talk around what it may be. So for a lot of you guys, are you running or are you growing? Because your business will reach a certain point where you can't do both.
If you only got that, that's worth the time. If you only got that one piece. In ending, I'll say one of the things, and this would be like in the operational side for the key hire, the bigger your world gets, what you might find is your assistant, like if you want to use that term, dramatically changes. Your assistant, when you were growing a real estate business, knew your clients' names, knew the transactions, knew the closing dates, was maybe even also your transaction coordinator at certain levels. But at some point, if you're running an expansion business, you might look over and see that you have an executive assistant who couldn't tell you squat about the real estate deals, couldn't tell you a single name of a single buyer or seller, but they run your whole world. And that becomes like one of those businesses, that becomes one of those hires that maybe you can't make at one point in your business. And I remember Gary made the comment, you were in the room too. He said, listen, when you guys could slide $1 million contract across the table towards a hire, your life will never look the same. I still don't have a business that I could put $1 million contract in front of somebody. I mean, I'm a sales guy, so I could tell you how it's $1 million opportunity. If I had a nickel for every time I've heard I got an opportunity, that, I mean, yeah, whatever. But I still don't have the bandwidth to say, here's $1 million. I got the bandwidth to say, here's 200 or here's 400. I got that bandwidth. And that looks different than when I can only offer 100 grand or 50 grand to somebody in a role. So I guess I'm saying all that to say this, none of this stays the same, and it wasn't meant to. It's meant to break. It's meant to level up. Different levels, different devils.
Yeah, I love that. I think as we close this out, the one thing that this whole time I've been thinking about, and for some this may resonate, for others you're like, you're off your rocker. This is what we do as business people. This is our profession. This is our sport. I've used that analogy. I've said this is our sport. If you're an all-pro, an all-star in your sport, if you're a professional in your sport, you are doing more, you are training more, you are stretching more, you're being more deliberate in your nutrition. Pick a sport, it doesn't matter. The best of the best are playing that game. They're not treating it as a game, it's their job. And they are doing a variety of things in the off season, the on season to get to where they're at. And I look at our real estate businesses. This is our profession. This is our job. This is our sport. So I would ask you, what's your equivalent of stretching, of nutrition, of training, of mentorship, of coaching, right? Like, what is that? Because again, this is your professional sport. You're not an NFL player, nor am I, Cody, obviously. But NFL players can actually look at the real estate space and say, hey, I'm not those guys. I'm not doing what they're doing at their level. They're the professionals. They're the all pros. I'm not necessarily saying you and me, but they look at individuals and they're like, they're the all pros in that sport. It's the same thing. The difference is they have 100,000 people sitting in the stadium watching them. And we feel awfully lonely because this journey is a lonely one. Point is, though, treat it as a profession, treat it as a professional sport, and ask yourself what's your equivalent if you were, in fact, an all-pro, an all-star in a sport. I'm just curious what your answers may be.
So well said. All right, everybody. Thank you for being here. Thank you for watching. For everybody who ends up watching the replay of this, this is yours. Like, keep it, use it, share it, give it to someone. Like, we don't have any rules around this. There's nothing for us to hide. So there's no rules. Thank you for being a part of it. Brian, thanks for taking 2 hours in Austin while you're there today to do this with us. It wouldn't have been the same without you. So thank you.
No, thanks for having me. And anybody want to email me, Cody, because you threw this out, You can email me, Brian, Brian at kw.com. Anything I can
How
help.
did you get Brian at kw.com?
Can't talk to you about that one, Cody. That's confidential.
Yeah.
But Brian at kw.com.
The body's buried somewhere.
I pulled a few strings.
I can't get Cody at kw.com. How come I can't get that?
Well, you may want to talk to our mutual buddy.
All right.
You may have
All right.
help with that.
Thank
All
you,
right,
everybody.
guys.
Have an amazing day. See
Thank
ya.
you.